Okay. Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be getting to spend this year with you as the Spiritual Entrepreneurship Fellow with Church of the Holy City. I wanted to start at the top of this sermon, just giving you a bit of a background on myself, and just saying a big thanks for welcoming me into your community. I've gotten to know a few of you, and I look forward to going deeper together in this spiritual journey that we will go on in 2026. So a bit of a background, I'm a recorded Quaker minister in the Religious Society of Friends. I joined Quakers right after I graduated college when I had just come out and I was looking for an affirming faith community. I had grown up in a pretty rural area, very evangelical fundamentalist. And so I was looking for some place that was affirming of queer people. So I found the Quakers, and I loved it, and I've been with them ever since. After that, I went to college in Cincinnati, and then seminary at Union Theological Seminary in New York. And then after that, I did policy school in London, and then from there I moved here to DC, and I've been here for about 2 years. To give you a background on my spiritual journey, a lot of it has, I've gone through these phases of like deconstructing more of a fundamentalist-based religion when I was just coming out and after I had graduated college. I've kind of been in and around Quakers, mainline liberal Protestants, Catholic spaces, evangelical non-denominational churches. I kind of explored mystic traditions as well. I think I used to consider myself as more religious rather than spiritual because growing up I really liked the service and the community aspect of church, but I didn't really feel like I had much of a spiritual connection to it. And that's something I've developed more over the last few years, where I've been able to move from my head into my heart a little bit. And that's something that I've been able to explore through Quakerism and different Christian mystics. And I think that's also what drew me to Swedenborgianism, how I really appreciate how we share that same commitment to appreciating that everyone has this direct divine experience with God, and that no one has a monopoly over that. And being a Christian or being a person of faith, it matters a lot more about how you show love in the world rather than what you believe. So that's a little bit about me. You can ask me questions about it after the sermon. But I wanted to start with, this is a very good topic for a day that we are all snowed in. I wanted to talk about winter, and particularly January and February. These are the months that many of us dread. If you have seasonal depression, or if you're just a summer person, you're a beach person, this can be a really, really tough time, especially coming out of the frenzy of the holidays. January and February, to me, has always been this kind of time where it's uncomfortable. The nights are very long. The world kind of slows down. And I think part of the reason it's uncomfortable is we're kind of forced to confront ourselves in a way, because when everything stops, we kind of have to investigate parts of ourselves that we just maybe don't pay attention to in busier months like the summer. But recently, I've grown to appreciate these winter months a lot more as an invitation to turn inward and to spend time with God and to engage in more self-reflection. And I'm really inspired reading through all the different ways that Jesus in the Gospels would sneak away from the disciples or the crowds to be by himself, often at night. Sometimes for short periods, sometimes he would stay up through the entire night. And I feel like we don't talk about this a whole lot, like Jesus's private prayer life, because for good reason, we're focusing more on Jesus's public ministry. But I think it's really interesting to think about what was on the inside of Jesus's inner life that was informing this public ministry. And you see in the Gospels, he's using this solitude for different reasons, different ways of discernment. So at first, the passage from Mark, this is one of the first times he goes out by himself at night. And the Gospel of Mark is the first one that was written down. And he goes out at night, and his disciples are looking for him the next day. And he says, okay, we're going to this town next. So he had made the decision about where to go in his public ministry. So he's retreating to make these important decisions about where to go next. Also, right after he was baptized, the first thing he does is he doesn't start his public ministry. He goes into the desert for 40 days. He goes into dramatic inner transformation before he starts the hard work of public ministry. And then all the way to the end, where he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he is turned over to be crucified. There he is again and the scriptures describe it as this very vulnerable moment where Jesus is kind of wrestling with God in a way, where he's asking God to take this cup from him, the cup being being crucified. And so I think, hold on, I'm trying to see where I am now. Another interesting thing I think I find about Jesus's prayer practice too is we have to think that he was a highly, highly busy man, and he still found time, often cutting into his sleep schedule, I can imagine. So I think that for myself, like when I feel really busy, it really is a priority issue, and Jesus always made it a priority because he saw that this was the most important relationship to him. And I think we see this too in how we see how it's, I can also, if you have the time commitment too, if you're able to make the time for it, that may not be the issue. You may just be afraid to be alone with yourself too, which is a completely understandable feeling. Sometimes when we take the time to be alone by ourselves, the first things that come up are going to be very uncomfortable. We might have things come up that like we're ashamed of, or that we wouldn't even tell the closest person to us, or we wouldn't even admit to ourselves. And I think that's why the solitude or the loneliness of this time can be like really tough. But Jesus has this practice of solitude rather than loneliness, where it's this joy that we find in being alone rather than the fear of being alone. And this is really important because when we're able to enter into relationships out of this peaceful solitude rather than loneliness, we put less expectations on other people, or we put less expectations on a community. A community will always let us down because they're unable to love us in the way that only God is able to love us. Same with our individual relationships. When we say, you're lonely, I'm lonely, let's get together, it's a recipe for disaster because we put these huge expectations on each other without recognizing that God loves us in and of ourselves. Hold on, I'm losing my space a little bit. So I think as a personal anecdote, when I kind of discovered this when I was preparing my sermon too, I've always really liked doing sermons. To be honest, I have not done one for a long time, but I was really excited to start to work on this. But I noticed I was spending a few hours working on this and it wasn't coming to me for some reason. And I was really laboring with it and I couldn't figure out why. I was using the process that I used to use that worked really well for me, like a formula. So I went to bed. I woke up early before the sun came up, and I could tell that my heart was kind of muddied on this, and I just started writing. And the longer I wrote, the more I saw the things that my ego was saying about what I was writing. I think it's fair to say that a lot of times your ego does write the first draft. And so as I got further into it, I would see the voice that says that is just like really critical about how like, oh, you have to preach something that is going to speak to someone in this situation or that situation, or I have to live up to all the other sermons that came before this. And then once I was able to push those away, it was easier for me to find the golden nugget of a message, because every message has a golden nugget that you are trying to pull out. And the one that I found when I spent this time alone with God was that your relationship with God, with you and God alone, that is your most important relationship. And it is an intimate relationship. And like any intimate relationships, they take time, they take structure, they take vulnerability. It's very uncomfortable sometimes. But if you do the work, it can be incredibly beautiful. And it takes honesty. And once we're able to prioritize that kind of relationship, we will show up so much better in other relationships. I think you have some people who say they have this kind of relationship with the divine or with God, but then you see that they're not good. They neglect their families, or they don't help people on the street or anything like that. That is not the kind of relationship that we're talking about. If your number one relationship, God, is not making your relationships better, if it's not helping you heap more love onto the people around you, that is not God. So I tell you this story not to prescribe a certain way of creating this relationship, because I'm telling you this story to show how Spirit works in my life. Spirit's going to work a lot different in your life, and you may already have a process, or maybe you're trying to figure out what that container looks like. Maybe you're a morning person, so you want to wake up early. Maybe you like journaling. Maybe you're a night person. Maybe you feel closer to God going on a long walk. Maybe you're a very visual person where it helps to meditate on a picture of Jesus or a symbol. Maybe you like reciting a prayer or a mantra, or maybe it's wordless meditation. Whatever that looks like for you, take the time to make a container for it, recognizing that intimate relationships do take a lot of work. And we have the gift of winter right now. We have the gift of these long nights and this snowy day to turn inward and focus on God. I'll turn it over to questions. You're welcome to ask questions about the sermon, or if you have questions about my background, I'll take those now.
I only want to make a comment. We had a convention at a Quaker college one time near Cleveland, and I visited the church there in Cleveland, and that was such a wonderful experience. They had a an exhibit on war and peace in that particular college, so that was very inspiring. Yeah, it was my first contact really with a Quaker institution, so I'm grateful for that.
Really? Wow. There are lots of Quakers in Ohio. So,
Mhm.
That's lovely. Thank you.
I see
Um,
Jose and Katie, or Jose or Katie raise their hand. Let me ask you to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
yes.
Kelly, we really enjoyed your sermon and we want to thank you so much. I was also just curious because I know you mentioned that you're a Quaker, and I know that Quaker services involve silent worship, and I always thought that was really interesting and really powerful. And I think related to what your message was today with solitude and reflecting inward. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are regarding the benefits of worshiping in silence in a meeting with others versus worshiping in silence alone. But yeah, we just wanted to thank you again. We really enjoyed your service, sharing your background, and we're really happy that you're here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. That is a great question because it is such a different experience spending worshiping by yourself versus worshiping with somebody else. I mean, I think in Quakerism we might call it private worship, and then corporate worship. Um, and I do find when you're doing it by yourself, it is so there is an intimacy with it that you may not get in when you're worshiping with a bunch of people. At least for myself, I find that I have a little bit more permission to um, maybe I like sometimes I laugh or cry when I'm worshiping by myself, where I might be less apt to do that if I'm in a room of Quakers. But there's also some really powerful things that happen when you're worshiping with a bunch of people in a room. Quakers call it a covered meeting when you kind of have like a critical mass of people who are kind of like in the flow, if that makes sense. And it's just a very, I mean, these things are hard to describe with words, but it's just a very electric energy. So that's a great question. Anyone else?
Oh, I have a question. First, I really enjoyed your message tonight. One thing that I was thinking about, you said that you're encouraging us to have a relationship, or you call it an intimate relationship with God. It seems to me one of the challenges there is in most relationships, it's two ways. I'm conversing with you, we're having a conversation, I'm speaking with you, you're speaking back to me. God hasn't been speaking to me unless I'm missing it. How do you deal with that? If how do you make it not just a one-way conversation?
Mm, I think a good place to start, I guess I have like two answers for this, at least the way I have approached this. Um, I think a good place to start is just trying, like, feeling presence. Like, the way I like to think about it is like you might have like a really close friend, or maybe it's your cat that just can sit next to you in silence and you feel really comfortable with that. And so I think that's an image that I hold on to sometimes. Um, Another thing for me is I noticed easier for me to hear it was easier for me to hear God's voice once I started reading authors who would write about God in a way that made more sense to me. So today I was pulling a lot from Henry Nouwen, and a lot of the stuff I've read with Henry Nouwen has kind of changed the way I hear God in a way where the way he'll write about it is I I'm like, "Oh, that does sound like God." And then when I spend time alone, it's easier for me to hear that. That's just my own experience. I don't know if anyone else has had um, other insights like that from reading spiritual authors that kind of help them hear in a different way.
Thank you. I thought that was a great answer. I really like
Oh,
that. And
thank you.
also, as we know, Swedenborg himself, unlike me, he did have a dialogue with God.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
I wanted to thank you, Kelly, for the sermon as well. It kind of helped shine a mirror to my face in one aspect. I don't often, I think, give time and space. Both are important to listening to God, and often come with my requests, but not waiting to hear what he has to say. So this week I'll be paying more attention to that. And I mentioned time and space because mm, some time ago I watched a wonderful movie called Prayer Room, and it was about a woman who found a physical space in her house to
Mm,
talk to God and communicate about issues she was having in her marriage. And I think there is something to that as well. So when you mentioned container,
mm.
um, it caught my attention as well, having time and a safe space to have that. So great job. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Katerina. I do I do hear that from a lot of people, and I think myself too, having a dedicated space that you go to each time in private is really helpful. And maybe you like light a candle there or burn some incense, just to kind of, because I think our bodies have memory like that. So if you're sitting in the same place, you're smelling the same thing, it can really help center you. So I love that.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I really and appreciated your sermon. Your mentioning of winter forces. I can't resist reading a short poem that Louise wrote about winter. Winter comes but once a year, though tends to linger once it's here. Naked trees, skies like lead, wool hat itching on my head. The days are cold and dank and drear. I'm glad it's only once a year.
Beautiful poem.
I don't want to be talking again, but I want to say, since I'm now in a retirement home for a few, been a couple of months, 3 months maybe. So I've been thrown into a community, and it's, they call it family style. So this is quite a challenge for me. So I have to really work at myself,
Mm,
patience, or a number of things, holding back criticism so they won't kick me out,
mm,
and things like that. So I'm trying to talk to God, and I'm trying to asking Him to make me more humble so that everything becomes more acceptable, because this is really no suffering, it's just an adjustment. But I do have to subdue my my responses, and so that's what I pray for at the moment.
mm. Wait, so Alpha,
I
are you?
have a,
Oh,
I mean,
go
I
ahead.
have a room I can go to. I'm by myself, you know what I mean? So
Mm.
that's not the problem, but you see what I mean, I think.
It's more so just knowing people are around and being in this communal living situation, even though you have some privacy, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, you're constantly interacting with
Mm,
strangers, and in an
mhm,
environment that I hadn't really known before, even though I've been in the States for, like 50 something years. It
mm,
was a different environment than here in the more country area, where the people
mhm.
some haven't even traveled. You see what I mean? So it's a
Yeah.
challenge for me, and I'm trying to get on top of it. And I do ask the Lord to help me there.
Yeah, I mean, I think environment matters so much. I notice, I mean, if I'm trying to get centered out in the country, it happens so much quicker than it does in DC. But that means it's all the more important to do it when you're in these like very
Yes.
like busy and bustling places. So thank you, Alpha. Ellie.
Hi, thank you so much. So nice to meet you. I was just wondering, Rich compares like modern church with going to therapy a lot and advocates for how those should kind of be different domains. I'm also in grad school to be trained as a therapist, so I think they are different, but I would just be curious to hear your take on what you think the different purposes of this, like spending reflective time kind of with yourself in a spiritual sense versus spending it kind of in more of that reflective space.
Oh, like this is a question about like what are the therapeutic benefits of it and like what's beyond the therapeutic benefits?
Yeah, I think more like what distinct purposes do you think each might serve? Or more about the spiritual time.
Hmm. I mean, I do think. Okay, if I'm hearing your question correctly, I mean, I think there's been a lot of situations with therapists where I've thought, okay, this is only taking me so far, but I think like spending time alone would take it spending time alone with God would take it a lot further. I think particularly for relationships, which is what I was talking about in my sermon today, about how like we show up in relationships just like expecting so much of the other person. And I've been thinking a lot over the past year about if people recognize more how much God loves them, they would be able to show up more in relationships because there's things, even the person who is closest to us, there's things they will never understand about us. And I find if you can get to like that sort of intimacy with God, it makes a really big difference to feel seen in those areas, which helps at least me show up a lot better. Is that answering your question at all? It's probably not. But
No, it totally is. Yeah, the idea that like I agree that like being able to meet your own spiritual needs and feeling like truly witnessed by something, I think is just in my own experience, it's just its own like qualitatively different thing. So it's really cool to hear your thoughts on it.
thank you. I also like the word. I like the word witnessing too. I think that's what I'm getting at. That's a good way of putting it. Thanks, Ellie. And awesome that you're going to school for that. We'll have to chat more about that sometime. Anyone else?
There are a few things that came up in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, but
Oh,
Carol,
thank
thank
you.
you for the sermon. Yeah, you can read it out loud.
Oh, thank you, Carol. Thank you for your sermon. Good for introspection at this time. That's from Carol. Sherry Smith. Scott and I appreciate your transparency, Kelly. Thank you. I try to be transparent. I feel like you get a lot more out of it the more transparent you can be. Did anyone want to share things that they find work really well for them for like creating this container of intimacy with God? Practices they do, or maybe share how your practices have changed over time based on your circumstances?
I'm mostly familiar with the Catholic practices of monasticism, especially the Lectio Divina, which is very similar to what you said, is that you put yourself into like a prayer closet or special place, and then you read a scripture, usually from Proverbs or Psalms, individual, very slowly, and you wait till a word stands out amongst you, and that will be the Lord speaking to you. Then you meditate on that word. You ask how that word relates to your specific situation. And that's how I can most relate to what you're saying.
Cool. I haven't had anyone explain it to me like that. I haven't explored Lectio Divina, right? Yeah.
Next,
Has it? Oh, go ahead.
it means holy reading. We also describe it as the dark night of the soul. Say,
Mm,
when Moses was at the foot of the mountain, He's dark, but as he slowly climbs up the mountain, he's going into the light for the burning bush. So you have your lower soul, your understanding. As you read into the scripture, you're going into greater light, which is the divine word of the Lord. Yeah, I'm just using different terms, but the same thing is what you're describing, but just in a different way.
Oh, this is really fascinating because I mean that does relate really well to kind of doing shadow work during winter, like trying to go into kind of having those dark nights of the soul.
Yeah.
Ross and Louise said, glad to see another Quaker / Swedenborgian. Thank you. Then Sherry said, there's an app called Hallow that has a free daily Lectio Divina. You use it almost every day. Wow. Okay, so you're a daily user. That's cool. Anyone else? Jason, please remind us, please, the writers who inspired your message today. So that's a great question. Thank you. The first one is Father Henry Nouwen, who was actually a professor for Reverend Tafel. So they knew each other. He taught at Harvard and Yale, right? But he's kind of he was just so good at writing about spiritual formation and spiritual direction in like he just has a very like intimate and like transparent voice. I know some of you have read him, but I really like his work. He has a popular book called Wounded Healer. The other one's a little bit out of left field. It's his pastor I was recently introduced to by my sister called John Mark Comer. He is an evangelical non-denominational pastor. But my sister gave me a book of his over the holidays, and I go and look through the bibliography, and he's listing all these mystics and Quakers, and he's listing Henry Nouwen, and he's talking about this practice that Jesus had of disappearing and having this practice of himself. So that was really interesting for me to kind of go back into like evangelical land to find that there's some similarities. So yeah, I used an evangelical and a Catholic like in the same sermon.
Kelly, maybe you can put some of these readings in the newsletter, or you can send them to me and I'll put them into the newsletter for us.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your engagement. I really like this discussion. I'm looking forward to more of these discussions with you all. And thanks for the encouragement for my first sermon with you all. So I really appreciate that.